right, everybody. Hey, thanks everybody for being here today. My name is Nort Johnson. I have the privilege to be the president of the Faribault Chamber of Commerce and the honor to open the program up for you today. If you've been here before, something I always like to share, it's meaningful to me. If you live and work in Rice County, I believe you're in the agricultural business, no matter what your occupation is. If you're working at Quick Trip or the bank or for city government, everybody here prospers from the agricultural industry, and we appreciate you greatly. With that, I'm going to bring Kelly Watts to the podium to give you a little bit more information. Kelly's co-chair of our Ag Committee.
So I want to thank you all for being here with us today. Success of an event comes down to the attendees. So we'd like to thank each and every one of you. I'm Kelly with the Community Co-op, and I'd like to say that as the co-op embarks on our 100th year next year, I've realized more and more how involved with agriculture we all are. The research I've done preparing for our events and celebrations next year come down to 6 farmers that organized our co-op in 1925. There is no gratitude deep enough to thank all of our farmers for what they do, including the 6 that organized our co-op to what we have now today with thousands of patrons and owners. I joined the Agribusiness Committee when I began with the co-op 10 years ago, and our group has been so fun to work with and grow. We gather once a month at the Faribault Chamber of Commerce and plan events that benefit both our farmers and the children. We put together the third grade ag in the classroom, which is taught by our members in local classrooms, along with busing them to the farms to see where the food on their tables originate. I believe when they start this, they think that the food just comes from the grocery stores. But they learn through the ag in the classroom where it comes from. That's what the funds of today's events are benefiting. We also provide a program at the Rice County Fair named Best of the Best in Agriculture, awarding deserving farm families recognition of their hard work. If your business is ag-related, or if you yourself are a farmer that would like to be involved with our great chamber and the Ag Business Committee, please see one of us today and we would be happy to include you with our group. We'd like to grow on that. So I hope you enjoy your meal. I'm going to turn the mic over here to John Dvorak, and we look forward to serving you in the upcoming years.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for your kind words. There's a couple of items we need to do first before we get going here. And the first thing what I'd like to do is I'd like everybody to give a big hand to Cassie Steves. She's the mastermind behind this. She's the one that's she spends countless hours putting this function together, and it's well-deserving. Thank you so much, Cassie. Before we get going here, let's take a moment to remember those that are not here with us, whether they're departed or unable to attend. If we can have a few moments of silence for them, please. All right, thank you. And now let us bow our heads. I have a little parable that I want to read for our invocation, and I thought how fitting it is for this occasion. It's funny how a farmer spends countless hours getting the land ready for plowing to planting. He spends thousands of dollars on fuel, equipment, and repair bills. He spends many hours praying for rain or sunshine instead of sleeping. He sweats like no other job will make you. He works like no other people won't. He gets yelled at and cussed out by people who get caught behind the tractor traveling down the road. And he spends many times of the day wondering, is it all worth it? The deer, the coyotes, the hogs, the coons, the gophers, the grasshoppers are just a few of the pests to contend with. He does all this for what? Ask yourself, why would he do that? The answers are all around you. The plate of food sitting in front of you, the clothes on your back, the shoes on your feet. And the last answer is the one that puzzles most people. It's the dust, love for agriculture, and the satisfaction he's knowing he has done his part at the end of the day. I'd like to thank all farmers out there who help to make the world go around. God bless the farmers. Thank you. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. It's not only an honor, but it's a privilege to be able to introduce him. It's Thom Petersen, our Commissioner of Ag. Thom has spent countless days on the road, and I had a conversation with Thom here not too long ago, and I think if we added up all his miles, we could probably go around the world a couple of times, all the miles he's putting on his card. So I want to introduce Thom Petersen.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, thanks for having me today. Thanks, John, for the invitation, and just a lot of great Americans in this room. I just look around and I see a lot of people that I've met in my travels coming to Rice County in this area. You know, it's always interesting. I keep a map as Commissioner of Agriculture in my office, and I've been Commissioner for about almost 6 years. And I keep a map that I drew, and I write in the cities when I go. But and by the way, Anna works with me, and she's here. And so we try to always see, like, make sure we're covering the whole state, right? Because there's agriculture everywhere. And I always notice that when I go to Northwest Minnesota or Southwest Minnesota, I always feel bad because people say, man, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming and listening and seeing what we're doing. But everywhere is important. Minnesota is amazing. Minnesota, for me, in agriculture, we're just like a powerhouse in agriculture. And so, but I always think like Rice County, I come here a lot, and that's because looking around this room, you all do a lot of neat things. I think last year we went to Northfield 7 times for like meetings. So I'm always like, I can't add anything new to my map because I'm going to Northfield or Faribault. But that just shows, and then looking around. I also wanted to say thanks for donating to Ag in the Classroom. That's a program that runs through the Department of Agriculture. So today what I was going to do is you kind of get my take on agriculture. You get kind of what I think are some of the top issues, how I kind of look at it, what the Department of Agriculture does too, because I think a lot of times you kind of know, but you kind of don't know. And so I think that's always kind of helpful. So those are kind of the things that we put together, and I do a lot of speeches and slideshows, so hopefully, I think I looked at this one and somebody, I asked them to put things in here, and we'll see what ends up in here. But again, just want to thank you a little bit about myself. I live about an hour north of the Twin Cities in Pine City. For those of you I don't know, I live on a farm. I don't farm actively anymore. I did. Most of my life, my family, we've been in the horse business, buying and selling horses. I've competed at the state fair. This is my 43rd year. Trying to get my 50-year pin. I don't know if I have 7 more years in me though, so it's been kind of difficult. But it really helps me just be in the community and do a lot of things. I also served as the Director of Government Relations prior to being Commissioner for the Farmers Union for 17 years, lobbied on behalf of people in both St. Paul and in Washington, D.C. Worked on a lot of farm bill issues, a lot of things. I'd always say when we did our annual meetings that the Rice County meeting was my favorite because it was the most eclectic group of people, because you'd have large hog farmers, you'd have dairy farmers. I think of a guy named Dean Franz, who's a very interesting guy. You'd have professors from the colleges that had small acreages or farms, and you'd have fruit and vegetable growers. You kind of have everything here, and that's kind of what I'll talk about. So let's get into it. Hopefully you can all see it. If not, I'll kind of talk through it. So I always think about when we talk about agriculture in Minnesota, and I look at it as being commissioner, the things that we do are make sure that we have an affordable, abundant, and accessible supply of food. And so I'm kind of the chief cheerleader. I look at it for agriculture. I have to be positive. I'm out there trying to, talk about what are the good things in agriculture in Minnesota, but it's also able to understand what is agriculture in Minnesota. So we say we have 65,000 farms in Minnesota. And does anybody know what makes a farm in Minnesota? What's the threshold? Oh, Jerry, one of the $1,000 of gross income. So I sold 2 loads of hay, 3 horses, and a goat last year. I'm a farmer. Okay, so when you further drill that down into some of the folks in this room, you look at how important you are, because then look at the other folks in this room and what one farmer draws. And I always say, like, look at who comes to my farm, and I'm not even a big farmer, but a veterinarian, a fuel company, all the different supply companies. So we see that 65,000 farms, average farm size 389 acres. The one thing I just point out in this is the nice thing about Minnesota is how well our crops and our livestock balance. And last year, they didn't balance great. This will get closer this year with beef, pork, and dairy numbers being better, and unfortunately our corn and soybean prices not being as well. And so, but we see that $13 billion number and that $9 billion number. Most of my career looking at this, it's been about 10 or 10, 9 or 9, like right in there, that it's really nice that it balances. And then the 388,000 jobs. And when you look at like a gathering like this, and I look around the room and you see bankers and all kinds of different people that, rely, co-ops, agronomists, so many different people, even broadcasters. So very important. So Rice County, I just had them throw this in here. This is 2022 Ag Census, and we always say, Ag Censuses are a pain. I think I get 5 of them, and you fill them out. But they do help us give us a snapshot of what we're looking at here, and so we see a little smaller farm size. We see, you see 1,000 farms, and then we have more people involved in the farms, so that's where you get that bigger number. But of course, you have the other nice balance where you have the turkeys that are so important, and the hogs and cattle, as well as the other pieces. Where Minnesota ranks is also really important when we look at, as I go around the world and the state, the country, and we talk about that. We have a couple of national groups here in Minnesota this week, and it's really good when we can talk about where we rank in things, which is really important. And we rank very high. Sugar beets, of course, not in this area, but up in the valley, we'll be up there next week for their annual meetings. That's an incredibly important crop that we grow. And turkeys. And turkeys we're by and large the largest turkey producer in the nation. And oddly enough, or greatly enough, Rice County is going to be featured here in a couple of days. The presidential pardon turkeys are going to be from Rice County here. And I'll be in DC on Monday with those turkeys. And so that's a neat thing, but it's a great thing that we can highlight from Minnesota, from Rice County, and that'll have the national spotlight on that. And then hogs. Hogs are another big piece. Hogs are a high volume, but to be number 2 in hogs is also just incredibly important to our state, and it's also like a high volume cash crop as well as soybeans and corn. So you take those, are some of the top commodities. We rank right up there. And then the other ones we just want to highlight, number 8 in dairy. And to be honest, we've seen some slippage in dairy. Hardest thing I open every month, and I'll go through that, or maybe it was on here. We'll go to it in a minute. Okay. But is dairy, and then, sorry, John, we're still number 12 in sheep, so we're trying to get there. But I think we'll make it at some point here. But so there's a lot of things we can just say, that we're good at and that we produce and everything. So I always think this is interesting. I've been doing this same presentation for like many, many years, and I never saw the line that says meat pellets on it. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Anybody want to guess how many mink farms we have licensed in the state? 6. So I always think that's interesting. We used to have more, but we do have some mink farms. And then I always think it's interesting to say Rice County, and we see this a lot. You're close to Rochester, close to the Twin Cities. It provides a market for a lot of different types of farms too, which I think is really important. You look at, in our state, we have 650 organic farms. That has stayed the same for about 20 some years, more probably. I've been involved in organic agriculture for a long time. That's a pretty static number. And those are certified farms. We have more that are not certified. There's 11 in organic Rice County, but there's 6 that are transitioning, which is very interesting. We have our Minnesota Grown program, which has, if you're not familiar with that, you could go into the Minnesota Grown website. You could say, I want to buy local beef, and I live in Faribault. You type that in, and you get the farms that are listed close to you. We get a lot of hits on that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute as an opportunity. And you can see that we also have CSAs. If you don't know what a CSA is, that's where people bring the vegetables right to you every week, and you buy a subscription to that. That's a real growing piece too, as well as farmers markets. And so 375 statewide. And then here's some of the farms, just for example, that are Minnesota grown farms that are in Rice County, which I think are really, a lot of those you're probably very familiar with. I've been to many of those to see, and that's a real, growing thing. And again, you're in a good proximity to continue that growth and movement on that piece. The other thing that's really great about Minnesota is that we are home to a lot of big businesses. When I go to my national conferences and everything, I get to do a lot of introductions because we, are home to Hormel, CHS, General Mills. You can read that, Land O'Lakes, Cargill. I see they threw Faribault Foods and Genio in there too as an important example of some local production. But again, very important when you look at what's located in Minnesota, that 5 of the Fortune 500, 17 biggest companies are here. And so that's very important, as well as co-ops too, very important. Of course, Land O'Lakes, CHS are co-ops there too. And just kind of highlighting what some of the things that the department does. We do dairy and food inspection, very important. If you're looking at grocery stores are a really important piece that we do. Of course, dairy farmers, I'm not sure if there's any dairy farmers here. And we did pull that there's 1,700 dairy farms in Minnesota, 27 in Rice County. I think when I started, there was almost 70, so we've seen that. It's hardest thing I open every month is the dairy farm count. And we knew that was coming. We had a kind of a silver tsunami of dairy farmers that, as we looked at a baby boomer age and then nobody, coming behind them. And we know it's tough when you're milking, smaller cows, or smaller numbers. But it works for some people, and we try to support that as much as we can. And so the interesting thing about dairy, and I don't think I have this in the slide, where our farm numbers are at 1755, our dairy cow numbers have not changed. They've been roughly between 440,000 cows and 465,000 cows, again, for the last probably 15 years. And so the farms are just getting bigger, but we still have the cows there as well. Okay, challenges, go through that really quick. You probably all know about this. The first one doesn't totally apply to this area though, because you're a bedroom, some parts of Rice County are a bedroom community. You do have different things going on here and everything, but if you get out to western Minnesota and some of those areas, we do see a declining population and challenges with workforce. So, but I see positives here. I see a lot of things like Pine County, where I am. We just wired the whole county into high-speed internet, and you see people. We have a lot of people that farm and have a full-time job, where one of them can now work at home. Whether that's something, and that really helps the farming operation. It also, that high-speed internet has helped, with equipment, with direct marketing, and all those type of things. Transportation bottlenecks, of course, commodity prices have been challenging this year. Extreme weather is something, I always say too, in my 6 years as commissioner, we had, the wettest year on record was 2019 until this last year. 2021, we had the windiest year on record. Oh no, that was 2022. 2021, we had the worst drought we had in 50 years, since 1988. We had a drought in 2023. I don't really talk about what happened this year, because we had the wettest May Is it the wettest May or the wettest June on record? Probably both. And then we had the driest September on record, so what the heck, and you saw with crops and everything else, but the weather challenges, they're there, and so we continue to see those and, as a big challenge. And then of course, animal disease has been a real heavy issue for our department. We've seen it some in this area where we have turkeys. Very important. We had avian influenza in 2015. It came back in 2022, with a vengeance. We had over 100 cases. 2023, it kind of lightened a little bit. In 2024, we had a couple of cases, wasn't bad. But I don't know if you remember this, about January of last year, we had a mysterious cattle disease in Texas, and they thought it was maybe wildfires and Kansas, things like that. Turns out the dairy cattle had avian influenza, but they're dairy cattle, not turkeys, so it didn't kill them, made them sick, dropped some milk production, and that started to move around the country. So we had both of that and kind of a big issue. We ended up with 9 cases in Minnesota that were confirmed. We know we probably had 5 to 10 times that. And it's a concern for Minnesota because we have so much poultry. So, if it gets into a dairy farm, it can be a problem and everything. But, if it gets into a turkey farm, it's fatal. So we have a lot of turkeys where we have dairies. And so we've worked really hard with our partners, whether that's the Turkey Association, the Dairy Association, our co-ops, our Board of Animal Health, our USDA, to really ramp up our biosecurity, have good protocols in place that we're able to work through this. It's still a concern. We hadn't had a case for almost a couple of months, and knock on wood, but what we saw Colorado have it kind of really grow up in their dairies. They only have 100 dairy farms. I think 60 of them got high-path avian influenza. Now California has it in almost 300 herds. They only have 900 herds, so a third of the dairy farms in California have avian influenza. And so they're seeing then problems with their poultry and other pieces. And so we have to, really work hard to keep on top of this and identify it. And I always say too, I just did an interview with WCCO before I came down here. Remember, any type of meat, it's safe to eat as long as it's cooked properly and milk is pasteurized. It's not an issue, but it's something that everybody should be aware of. We did have a case come back this week, in fact. It's always a Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock, where my emergency manager comes in and says, I got to talk to you. And I was like, oh. And she said, we have a high-path case. And first time we've had it in emus. And so that was really interesting. So just to give you a little snapshot with all the fun that I get to work on every day. I always want to say, because we do have some issues this year, that our state has farm advocates. We're really lucky to have this program in our state, and they're free to farmers. And so farmers that are having financial issues, they're having almost kind of any kind of issues. They really work a lot on finances. They kind of maybe one step before you get to mediation. But an advocate a lot of time, to me, buys farmers sometimes, helps them reorganize. A lot of these advocates are former farm business management instructors. I can just tell you personally, I've been doing this for 25 plus years, how many farms that they've saved. And a lot of times I got to ask a farmer, because they'll call and say, I got $2,000 in my bank account and I'm trying to finish my harvest and I'm leveraged to the hilt. I say, call the advocate, and they'll help you. They'll get some of that money unlocked and things like that. And they'll call me back the next week, same problem. I said, did you call? No, I didn't call yet, So then finally they'll call and they'll but then they'll call back and say, oh, they freed up my accounts. I'm flowing again. I'm doing good. So I always say, if you know people that are in a tight spot or something, remember that we have these type of things that they can help with all these different things that you can see there, whether it's mediation. I try to, if I'm invited, go sit in on some mediations because they're very interesting, and we're lucky again to have that in Minnesota. Mediations also do help keep our farmers. Disaster, and then crisis counseling, also really important. Minnesota has 2 free farm counselors. I talked to the counselor this morning. Actually, this is kind of interesting, but I think he was calling to check on me. And because we had a farmer that last week that I kind of worked with and didn't turn out so good and everything, but they're free and they are confidential, and they've also helped a lot of folks. So I always wanted people to know that information's on our website. Also, beginning farmers, also really important at our state. We say, if you, say what's the average farmer in Minnesota, looks kind of like me, my age, my ethnicity, every kind of thing. But we see that changing a lot. We know that farmers are getting older. Extension does a good report telling us that 50% of the land in Minnesota is going to turn over in the next 20 years. And it's hard to buy land. It's hard to get into farming. So Minnesota, through help from our legislature, and by the way, I saw Keith Allen, who's a new state representative. Where's Keith? I wanted to just make a pitch, Keith. Okay, so we have our beginning farmer credit that I give credit to all of our ag groups. They all come and work on this, whether that's Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, the cattlemen, pork producers, because everybody recognizes we got to be able to pass farms. So that provides a 10% credit. If you're selling 5%, or if you're leasing to that next generation. And Minnesota has, to me, the best credit, that of any state in the nation. In fact, a lot of states are trying to copy our credit. I worked on this when I was a lobbyist, and when you want to kill a bill, what you do is you get a fiscal note and you just say how much it's going to cost, and you say, oh, it's too expensive. But I remember when they did the fiscal note, they said 500 farmers a year will use this, and they were, trying to sink the bill. And I said, yeah, I don't know if 500 farmers will use it. Well, we did 1,100 transactions last year. And so I know farmers that'll tell me they got that land because they use the credit all the time, come up and talk to me. We're still working on improving it and things like that, but it's helpful. We also, and I think I got another slide on this, we have essentially our own bank at the department. We have a rural finance authority. So not that farmers need another loan, but I want people to know that there's loans there that have a low interest rate. They work with the local bank. I used one when I was farming. They're incredibly helpful. Where our most popular loan is our beginning farmer loan program. And that, again, tells me that it's out there. A lot of the beginning farmers are maybe putting up a hog barn, maybe putting up a turkey barn. It's hard sometimes to buy land and get into farming, but maybe you can add that into your family's generation or something like that. We have a farm link program, so people that are retiring, we have a lot of people who have put their whole life into their farm, and they don't have any kids that want to farm, but they want to sell it or they want somebody to continue. It's kind of like a matchmaker type of thing. So you have somebody who wants to get into farming, they can kind of match with that. We have a down payment assistance program that we just started and continue to work on that. That provides $15,000 to help start a first-time buyer on a farm. And we've helped purchase 100 new farms in that state, in Minnesota. A lot of the people using that are the smaller farmers, and some of them are here in Rice County that are maybe going to sell into the Minneapolis farmers market or do small pieces. But to me, I've gone out and visited some of these the last week, and it's kind of cool to see, because a lot of times you'll say, "Oh, what can you buy with $15,000?" But many of you in this room, I know when I bought my first farm, I always tell people I bought it, I sold my baseball card collection. How do you come up with those dollars that the bank says you gotta have? But it's a cool thing that our state has. You can look at all of our grants. This is another thing I did as a commissioner, because we have a lot of grants. We have a grant for just about everything, or a loan. But you can look there. So if you ever just go to our website, put in loans and grants, you'll get a list of all of our loans and grants. We got about 40 of them. So trade is another opportunity. I think right now we're looking at our prices, and not to be super political, but as we turn over into a new administration, there's a lot of talk about tariffs. There's a lot of that's another issue that comes up on interviews and things like that. And right now, a lot of questions about what's going to happen. We have a new president in Mexico. We have just a lot of, we have low commodity prices. We're competing against Brazil, Argentina. We have a lot going on in Ukraine, Russia. about 30% of what we produce on average in Minnesota is exported on the commodity markets. And so as we look at that, we need to continue to build those relationships. We need to continue to do that. And so we'll see what happens. But as a commissioner, I lead trade delegations. We've really focused on a lot of different areas. I'm trying to think what they put in here. They, of course, I look at Mexico, Taiwan. We've spent a lot of time in Morocco. Some of our staff will be there next week. Morocco, we've been looking at our ships from the Duluth port fit nicely into the Moroccan port. And so they also are looking at backhauling fertilizer. And so we're trying to figure out some of these different markets. Because our biggest markets, really, no surprise to all of you, are Mexico, Canada, and China. And so, we could talk the whole day about China. I just want to mention Canada, because I think it's important, because I think, as we look at President Trump coming in and everything, remember, USMCA, which is our trade agreement, which replaced NAFTA, was negotiated in the first Trump administration. But it comes up for review in 2026. So all of you that belong to farm groups and everything, in 2025, we're going to start digging into that. But we have GMO issues with corn, and we have a new president in Mexico. We have a lot of pork sales going to Mexico. We have dairy issues with Canada. But I want to make that a positive, though, too. As we have issues, but we have great relationships. And so we want to work on maintaining those so that you have markets, so that we have a flowing economy. And so we'll continue to work on that. Trade missions that we did in the last year, you can see there. The one that I don't have on here that I did last year was Cuba. And so that was really interesting. A couple of quick comments that I had on Cuba was, I think, and I'd say this, and this is the governor's position, that we do have to look at what we're doing in Cuba. Because Cuba, a tenth of their population has left in the last 3 years to come here. So they have 11 million people. 1 million Cubans have left because they're hungry. And I saw it firsthand. They can't grow enough food. They can't get enough food. They can't get electricity. We got to do something different there. My favorite was going to talk to the farmers. And I thought this was really interesting because have anybody ever heard like Cuba's, oh, they're great. They grow fruits and vegetables. They're all organic. And they don't use any pesticides or chemicals or anything like this. So that was one of my questions when I got a group of farmers. It's like, oh, how do you do that organic? And that's kind of interesting and everything. And they say, well, the group I had, they were like, yeah, well, we don't want to be organic. We can't get any pesticides. We could grow double our crop to feed our people if we had access to fertilizer. And then when we do get a decent crop, we're an island nation and some random bug blows in and kills half of them because we don't have any pesticides. And then I watched a guy with a donkey going back and forth in probably a 40-acre field because he doesn't have any parts for his tractor. And so I just thought it was really interesting when we look at what the world view is sometimes when you get down there and actually talk to the farmers and what they need and what they could use is fascinating. So we continue to do that, but just know on your behalf, that's what we do. We also host a lot of inbound missions. And some of you in this room have had groups from Taiwan, Philippines, out to your farms. We like to go to Rice County a lot of times because it's close, right? Because it's like, we're not going to go to Wilmer or anything. You're an hour out. We can get down here, show some of whether it's a Japanese group, and show them, some of those type of things. A couple other things I just want to mention because it's kind of impacts this area as we look at biofuels as sustainable aviation fuel. We talk about biofuels in Minnesota, by the way. We lead the nation in the ethanol blend of almost 13% on average in our vehicles. We already had a 10% mandate, but you see all the new Quick Trips have 88 octane, and we set a record every month in 88 octane sales, which is E15. And so we continue to grow that. That produces markets. But sustainable aviation fuel is kind of the next big thing because we look at what they use and what they want to meet, how they're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You can see how important this is going to be. But what's important about this is who our partners are on it. You can see Delta at the top of that. They have a hub here. We have the Flint Hills refinery that has a direct pipeline that runs from Flint Hills to the airport, which is south of the cities. We flew the first flight based on SAF here about 3 weeks ago. I always joke I wasn't on it, it went fine, but it was great, you know, and so they're gonna be continuing to do more and more of that, and it's just gonna be a tremendous opportunity for our farmers. There are some options in that, let me see here. There is some issues, we'll have to see with the incoming administration, because it's based on what crop and how it's produced is going to be a key piece of that. And so corn, just to be honest, is really important. And so kind of tying into this next slide when we talk about what are the alternative crops we're gonna grow. There's a lot of people that aren't fond of corn in Minnesota and politics and think that, corn produces a lot of issues, whether it's nitrates or other things like that. But the fact of the matter is Minnesota grows a lot of corn, and we're gonna grow a lot of corn. So we gotta continue to improve and do different things, and genetics and all kinds of practices change all the time. And that's a piece of the story that I have to tell. And but I get that from a lot of the folks in this room that help us tell that story. And so when you look at the 24 million acres of cropland we have in the state, 8 million acres of corn, roughly 8 million acres or 9 million acres of soybeans, and then we drop all the way down to 1 million acres of wheat as our next big thing. So as we look at developing other crops, whether that's Kernza, we have an initiative at the University of Minnesota that is doing these perennial deep-rooted crops, and they do regenerate the soil, do a lot of good things. The most promising is camelina, winter camel. I was going to say, oh, it's not on there. It is on there. Winter camelina is what's being used in SAF right now. Cargill has made, an initial investment into that and continue to support that with some farmers even in this area. So that's, to me, it's going to be a real positive as we see that. I'm not going to mention, it's kind of a confusing piece on the right there. It's, but what I'll say is what it is we do have grant programs to help support food businesses developing here in our state and everything too as well. Almost done here. This is some of the other grants we have. This is a value-added grant. So if you have a business in Minnesota, one of the crops I didn't mention is developing is hemp. I working on getting that in the state. It's got complicated with cannabis, but we are getting there with hemp. We have several large processors that are building in Minnesota, and now we just have to help sell it. But we do have value-added processing. So if you're adding value to something like today was going to be the guy called about, or somebody else called about a piece of equipment, you could use our value-added grant to work on that. But value-added also works for livestock too as well. A lot of farmers maybe are adding value by direct marketing and selling things like that. Our Good Food Access grant that does small retailers like grocery stores really helps. Grocery business is tough, especially in small towns. So we have grants to help do coolers, things like that. We specialty crop block grant that helps our specialty crop growers that we have, and that can be really wild rice. Cultivated wild rice is a big one of those. And then we have a farm to school. It's also a big thing that we see developing at different school districts, even here in Rice County. We've always been able to sell apples, squash, things like that, but we're seeing a lot of sales of protein now going into schools, which is kind of exciting and helping farmers and just connect to a lot of times. They just have questions. Can I do that? Can I sell my beef to the local school if they want to buy it, or our turkeys? Ferndale Farms, just north of here, a lot of you are familiar with that. They sell a lot of their turkey now into schools, and so that's been really good. It adds value to this area, and the money stays in the community and helps everybody. We have an e-commerce grant. That's a really interesting grant. This is probably one of our fastest growing grants. This helps farmers build websites and content. It's not a huge grant, but it really helps a lot. We have farmers that have quit their jobs that are direct marketing beef pork, lamb, build their website. And I have one farmer that I work with, and she's in her 4th year now. We helped her with this and everything. She sends out 1 email a year now because her customer base is built so large. But she told me thank you because it all started with this grant and building a website and an e-commerce piece. We have a manufacturing cost share. So if you have a small food company, one of the things we do for the state is we have a lot of small food companies in our state. Let me see here. I think it's on the next slide, but we have a lot of developing companies. So there's several big food shows in the country, and it's hard for a small company. I'm thinking of one in this area, like Compart's Pork would be over. Maybe somebody might be familiar in LeSueur. They can't pay like the money, or Tater Cakes, somebody might be familiar with. Johnny Pops, Nordic Waffles, companies like that, they want to go big, but to go to these big food shows, they can't afford it. So the state comes in and we buy a pavilion, and then those companies come into our pavilion, and then we market and help them. And so it's a really good program. So as you know, our food companies, and we've been very successful with that. And well, I just thought real quick back on that is we have a really growing cottage food business in Minnesota. I don't know if there's anybody in here that does that, but if you make jams, jellies, you pickle pickles and then sell them at a farmer's market or something. When I started as commissioner, we had 4,000 licenses. We have almost 10,000 now. And so it's really interesting. And a lot of people are just going to do that, sell jams, jellies, stuff like that. But a lot of folks, I'd say the top 5%, they want to have a dream of making it big into a company. And that really came in COVID when people are just home, you know, unfortunately tinkering around, and they started making things and selling them. And that's become a really good deal, but that's something the department's coming in. All right, almost done. And again, these are just the loans that we have at the Department of Agriculture. Again, our biggest one is the Beginning Farmer loan. The one we really, am I done here? Let's see. Yes. Oh, it's not even on here. Okay, well, we have more loans than this, but we have a loan, and it's an ag opportunity loan. And so we're really seeing a lot of that. A lot of farmers are doing solar on their farmsteads. I'm not talking, we could get into that issue too if you want. On bigger solar projects. But you know, if you're talking about putting 5 acres on your property, a lot of hog or turkey are, you know, around the shelter belt doing that, and we're seeing a lot of loans on that all of a sudden. We have a restructure loan too that's also a really important program. And then an Ag BMP loan that works with Rice County or works with the local county on water improvement programs. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you. That was kind of a snapshot of all that we do. I always want people to know too that if you have an issue, I look around this room and a lot of the people I know here, if you have a question, you can always feel free to call us and say, you know, I have a question about this. I've got a couple of those today, you know, and we don't know there's a problem or something we could do better unless somebody tells us that, you know, or shares that with us. And I'm always open to that and trying to see if we can make it better for you, you know, help improve the system, you know, or anything else. You can also call too if you have something awesome happening too. So it doesn't always have to be a problem, and that happens too. Every day. So I just want to thank all of you. This is really impressive to see commitment. I have really tough meetings this afternoon with environmental groups and everything. And so it's really good just to see a room full of people that care about agriculture, are dedicated to agriculture. And so just keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
I've got one question for you. What do you guys do in your spare time? That is just a lot of fantastic, I'll say, product you're putting out there.
Thank you.
To support the ag industry, and we appreciate it. And we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
So, again, let's have one more round of applause for Thom.